Comprehend this. The strength of mind required to dismiss all fears and all signs of nervousness, to boldly go beyond where few have gone before. Listen, and hear how I maneuvered my lyrical sword in the heat of the battle. I'll paint images for you so you can view through my eyes too. Coming from beyond, it was necessary for me to understand the process of performance poetry, so I traveled through time to 0 AD. Upon my arrival, I asked about venues for performance. This led me to become a gladiator to test my talents lying dormant. As I stood in the tunnel of the gladiatorial arena with my sword in its sheath, thoughts of performing had me shaking like a leaf briefly before my hands started to perspire. Goose pimples on my arms as I felt my soul on fire. My breathing lost its rhythm as my chest began to tighten. My heart beat rapidly, as if I'd just been frightened. It was then that I felt the hairs on my neck uncurl and stand to attention, the signal for me to enter my beyond-alike dimension. I stepped out into the arena, and the crowd let out a roar. And at the same time, opponent number one stepped out onto the floor. It was none other than that weak gladiator, nervousness, coming out to try and infest my chest in order to suppress my lyrical finesse. Not one for defensive maneuvers, nervousness tried to attack me immediately. He thrust his sword straight at my sternum. I heard his supporters in the crowd shouting, "Burn him!" But little did they know that I had practiced my flow. I merely sidestepped nervousness and issued my own blow. I cut him to the deep with the sharpness of my delivery. There was no hesitation, no stumbling, just thoughts of chivalry. Nervousness proceeded to recede at a great pace, so that he'd survived the battle I and I in another dimension of time and space. As I turned to the center of the arena, the frenzied cheers of the crowd suddenly became muted. An apparition had appeared and was taking physical form, drawing from the diluted grains of sand predominant in all the land, and when the metamorphosis was complete, its stature was truly grand. It was none other than Fear himself. I instantly put my hand to the hilt of my sword. Fear issued the warning, "You shall be defeated by me, the Darkling Lord." The crowd was hushed. The challenge was set. The atmosphere was electric and quiet was kept. Fear waved his hand as if issuing a spell. This seemed to do nothing, or if it did, nobody could tell. I knew what he had done, for I felt it seeping into me. Fear had sent his emissary, Dry Mouth, to weaken me internally. I hurriedly drew my sword, but that's as far as I did get, for Fear had also issued paralysis, and through my body he now swept. Fear whispered words with low resonance, so only I could hear. "Just give up and bow down to me, and I'll be out of here." I looked upon Fear, then looked onwards into the crowd. Sitting there were my two sisters, Joy, who was deeply subdued, and Hope, who was shouting loud. And in between the two was my beloved Serenity, calm and unruffled, knowing just how to lift me. And that is why I put the ring on her finger and now call her wifey. She could view the situation, then further enlighten me. From where she sat, I lip-read what she said. "Beyond her, to conquer fear, you need only use your head, for you hold the power, you hold the key to destroy fear and set yourself free." Now, often when Serenity speaks to me, she doesn't mean it literally, but on this occasion I felt the need to look at my hands instantly, for time was ticking and paralysis was picking up the speed at which she chose to feed upon my person. Now in my hand was my sword, and as I looked upon it, sunlight reflected off one edge as brightly as it shone on it. A word was molded into the edge of the blade, and when I first saw it, I did an action replay. Then it all became clear to me what I had to do to set myself free, to defeat fear, paralysis, and Dry Mouth too. In one instant, I could destroy the whole crew, for the word on the edge of the blade was confidence. I merely had to project it with nonchalance. That was what was meant by Serenity when she said that I held the key. Now, due to being in a state of paralysis, I had to use my powers of telekinesis. I levitated confidence from my hand and directed it to fear by mental command. Seeing confidence advancing at a great pace, fear dispersed with paralysis and Dry Mouth to retreat in disgrace. I was now free, a champion of performance poetry, and it seemed to me performance poetry was quite easy. I walked towards Serenity with my sword trailing in my wake. Evidently at that moment I had made a severe mistake, for what I held in fact was a double-edged sword that somebody had previously taken from the Darkling Lord. On the second edge were molded the words, overconfidence, of which I was in a state of with my thoughts of nonchalance. But before I even knew it, the sword was wrenched from my grasp, and ambush was upon me, and my blood trickled on the dust. The perpetrator of such action was none other than forgetfulness, returning from oblivion, looking like he was on angel dust. Forgetfulness wielded a double-edged axe and sought to force me to back up in my tracks. Although weakened I was, I stood my ground. As forgetfulness closed in, I heard an ominous sound. It was nervousness and fear returning to join in the fight. I looked to within to give me sight beyond sight. Forgetfulness attacked, but his axe was too slow, so I bobbed and I weaved, dropping lyrical flows. Nervousness and fear were getting closer to I had to act quick or else I would soon die. I pulled out 2 daggers, rehearsal and prep, and into forgetfulness I wholeheartedly leapt. I stuck him with both in the heart and the neck. This sent forgetfulness back on his oblivious trek. Nervousness and fear, why they disappeared in a flash. My sister Joy gave cheer with style and panache. The crowd went wild, saying, what glorious show. I'd experienced performance poetry dropping lyrical flows. I accepted the cheers with humility. Overstanding performance poetry certainly isn't easy. I stood for a moment with hope, joy, and serenity, soaking up the atmosphere of the time 0 AD. Then we were gone, back to beyond. Thank you. Okay. So that was 3D. Check it out on Manorlogz, or go to www.dcosmic.com to see more of Beyonder's universe.